Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters here on France 24. I'm Mark Owen. In this edition, how Kunduz is rebuilding after its hospital was destroyed by friendly fire. Last September, the Taliban took Kunduz, Afghanistan's fifth largest city, proof as if it were needed of the strength of the insurgency. The counter-offensive led by US airstrikes hit the Médècins Sans Frontières hospital at Kunduz, a fatal error. Washington admitted the mistake. 42 people were killed. The kind of violence that we're still seeing has forced some 200,000 Afghans to flee their own country last year. This report from Claire Debussy.
Despite the sweltering heat, soldiers from the Afghan army are patrolling one of the most volatile districts in the Kunduz province.
We have a checkpost on that road. After that, it's Taliban territory.
How far are they?
1.5 kilometers. Last night we had some fighting. Lots of enemies have been killed because they started to come into our area.
The Taliban are close. Last year, they briefly seized the city of Kunduz. 20 soldiers now guard this checkpoint at the front line of the insurgency. In the spring, the Taliban resumed their attacks. They killed 5 people from this unit. But for the moment, the soldiers have managed to repel the insurgents.
They can't take this place again. At that time we had fewer soldiers, but now we are strong. We have increased the number of soldiers here. And special forces are here too. They support us from behind. When the Taliban comes a bit closer, the attacking team also comes forward.
Commander Mudassar was stationed in Kunduz a few months ago. After last year's fiasco, the government replaced the entire military command. These images, filmed with a mobile phone, show the Taliban hoisting their flag in the main square of Kunduz, the 5th largest city in Afghanistan. That was last September. A Taliban victory made possible by chaos in the Afghan forces. The army's counter-offensive with US air support has left deep scars. On the night of October 3rd, an AC-130 aircraft mistakenly bombed a hospital run by Médècins Sans Frontières. Their mistake cost the lives of 42 patients and staff.
So let's go this way.
Dr. Hashemi was in the operating room that night. The hospital was completely destroyed.
We came out of that door and we saw that stray bullets are coming at here, that place. It's not safe to walk or to run to that side. So when we heard that the bullets and small explosions, so we hid it here in this place. That everything was burning and
The bombardment lasted about an hour. Between 2:08 and 3:15 a.m., the emergency and physiotherapy wards were attacked several times, as was the intensive care unit where patients were trapped.
They couldn't move because they couldn't breathe themselves. They're connected to that machines and which was breathing for them, and they were unconscious at that time. This is the ICU. This is the heart of this hospital. The most important part of the hospital. This was the most powerful and the most equipped ICU in the region.
MSF calls it a war crime. Initially, the Afghan and US governments gave conflicting explanations. One claimed that armed Taliban were fighting from inside the hospital that night. It's a hypothesis that MSF has rejected.
It's not important who is on operation table. When you open the abdomen as a surgeon, everything is the same. But I reject that here was armed Taliban, armed fighters. Here was no armed people in the hospital.
The Pentagon ultimately concluded that a succession of errors led to the attack and punished 16 soldiers. MSF is not satisfied and has called for an independent investigation. Dr. Hashemi hopes to resume work soon, but the French NGO has not yet decided whether it will return to Kunduz. Many physicians left the city during the conflict and have not yet returned. Dr. Ghaffar is among the rare few to make the journey in reverse. He's from Kabul. He does not practice war surgery, but plastic surgery.
Are you okay? He's worried because he sees his doctor again. He will remember that day all his life.
2-year-old Omid suffers from a serious deformation of the palate. His father cannot afford to take him to Kabul for treatment, but Dr. Ghaffar has agreed to operate on him for free. This is the 4th time he has volunteered to work in this small clinic.
My main aim in these surgeries are that I have to help these kind of kids that they should never ever have a bad smile.
In the last 3 days, he has operated on 15 children. Omid is his last patient.
Bravo, bravo.
Dr. Ghaffar had to postpone his trip to Kunduz 3 times because of the risks. The day before his arrival, the Taliban kidnapped dozens of bus passengers just a few kilometers from here.
I was thinking that I'm also in danger, but I had appointment with all the patients. I told them that I have to come on this date. So I was thinking how I should leave them.
So he drove 7 hours from Kabul to keep his appointments.
Then you happy now?
Sure, Doctor. I'm glad you're here. It saves us from having to go to Kabul.
So all my patients are good, and I'm happily going back to Kabul.
But first, Dr. Ghaffar wants to see the reconstruction of the new clinic funded by Canadian donors. It's in the center of Kunduz, and this is where Dr. Ghaffar will operate the next time he visits. His main concern is the proximity of the Taliban.
They enter to the city from this area and from other areas, main roads. If Taliban is here, I cannot come. It's not possible. We have government, we have system, so why we should support Taliban? Come on, we have to go.
Dr. Ghaffar goes back to Kabul, not knowing what Kunduz will look like when he returns. For now, the Afghan flag flies over the city. Security forces control the center and the airport, but not much beyond. But the government has another idea for countering the next Taliban offensive. We are escorted by the Afghan intelligence service. At the entrance to the village, the armed men are not soldiers but militiamen. Their leader is Sheikh Zahid, an ex-Taliban. His former comrades consider him a traitor. During their brief takeover of Kunduz, the Taliban attacked the village and killed 2 of his sons.
That's Nakibullah, my second son.
Where was he?
He was killed at home. I was in my house at the time. I was fighting against them. As long as the Taliban are in Afghanistan, I can say that these are my personal enemies, the enemies of this country and the enemies of Islam.
In the name of the war against the Taliban, Sheikh Zahid rules this village of 2,000 families with an iron fist.
We have good intelligence and we are careful of our movements and surroundings. We hear regularly about the planned suicide bombers of the Taliban who wish to target us.
He commands 50 local men. Some are very young but highly motivated.
We're fighting like dogs. Yes, I'm saying the truth. If the enemies come, I will fight against them until the end. This is my country and my land.
They're heavily armed and paid by the government to hold off the Taliban. The few people we meet seem satisfied with the presence of Sheikh Zahid and his men.
He's a very good person, and thanks to him, this place is peaceful.
It's hard to know what he really thinks. The militias are regularly accused of abusing their power. Yet, the authorities rely on them to hold the front line against the insurgents. In Kunduz, the war is never far away, and thousands of residents have already fled. But some people still believe things will change, like Zarkul Alimi, who is something of a personality in the city.
Hello, how are you? It's good to see you.
You're in front of the camera, but no one wants to film me.
She's one of the only 2 female members of the Provincial Assembly. This morning, she went to the Department of Education determined to make things happen.
How are you?
She wants to organize training for students who pass the Concours, the National University entrance exam.
This is a very good initiative.
Yes, if you move faster, it'll be better.
Her reputation and position as an elected member makes her a prime target for the Taliban, who track all those suspected of working with the government. When the insurgents seized Kunduz last September, a group kidnapped her husband. Through the mediation of the elders of his village, he was released the same evening.
Thank you.
Despite the risks, she refuses to leave.
I have to be here because of a legal responsibility, because I promised the people who voted for me that I will work for them under any circumstances. And the promise that I made to them and Allah, I have to fulfill that, so I don't have any other options. For as long as I continue to live, I will pursue this.
She has made some concessions, though, moving her family from the district to the city where security is better. What worries her most is the future of her 5 daughters, aged 10 to 23. Tina, the eldest, is a police officer, a risk in a country where less than 1% of police officers is a woman. Kunduz accounts for 20 of them.
It's hard for women to be in the police force in Afghanistan, particularly in Kunduz. The Taliban are our main enemies. They do not want women to work outside, and certainly not in the police.
Tina and her sisters grew up with the presence of NATO and other international organizations. But security is deteriorating. And like many Afghans, Tina has no confidence in the government.
Even after 200 years, it won't be okay. Our generation have given our lives, but for the next generation, nothing will change. Society is unraveling. At work, I see soldiers who have come back from the front line. The situation is not good. They have no support. I'm losing hope. I don't think things will be okay, neither here nor in our country.
Unlike her mother, Tina would like to leave Kunduz and continue her studies abroad, preferably in Europe. Last year, nearly 200,000 Afghans applied for asylum in the European Union.
Our reporter Claire Debussy is here in the studio. Claire, thank you very much for that report on Kunduz. Can you bring us up to date with the very latest from the scene?
Bien, en fait, la situation dans la province de Kunduz, elle est très instable.
Well, in fact, the situation in the Kunduz province is very unstable. The Afghan forces are controlling Kunduz. They're present and very much visible in the city. We don't need to go far, only a few kilometers from the city to see a big change, less stability. There's no large-scale combat at this moment, but the Taliban is present in many villages in the surrounding districts. For example, they kidnapped dozens of passengers on a bus in this province in June. During the month of Ramadan also, images circulated which showed fighters on both sides with the villagers in the middle. This all goes to show what is happening here. The army is multiplying its operations there in the surrounding districts to capture the Taliban and to bring their progress to an end. So there you have it, an unstable situation.
Claire, the strike on the hospital shocked the world. It was clearly something that no one could ever have imagined. And it's hard to really get in our minds the effect that that must have had on people there. Can you tell us something about that?
It's true that when we look at what remains of the Doctors Without Borders compound in Kunduz, all the sections that belong to the administrative department are in a very good state. They're untouched. It was the section that received patients that was actually destroyed. Absolutely nothing remains of that. Doctors Without Borders has since issued a statement saying they cannot reopen the hospital as it stands. This was one of the busiest hospitals in the province, certainly in northern Afghanistan, specializing in war injuries. So while there are other hospitals and clinics in Kunduz for more serious injuries, patients have to go further afield to the neighboring province. And today, Doctors Without Borders doesn't know whether it can reopen the Kunduz operation or not. They hope to do so, but for the time being, they are in discussion with all parties involved, including the Afghan army, but also the insurgents. They need all the guarantee possible that there won't be another incident like this one.
It's a tragedy on so many levels, as you're pointing out. One wonders why some people choose to stay. I mean, obviously, with so many Afghans leaving, so many Afghan migrants coming to Europe, or trying to, one wonders why people still choose to stay.
The residents of Kunduz, those that come from there, perhaps don't have a choice, but there are some residents that feel the situation is better, because in the city itself there is a presence of Afghan forces. But the city was last year captured by the Taliban, and that sent shockwaves across the country. Today, many people don't want that to happen again because it is a big deal to think there could be a repeated incident. So there's a lot of reinforcement in the province today, like new military commanders. Even a new head of intelligence service was put in place in the province after the fall of Kunduz. So there are great efforts in place to ensure nothing like that happens again. And this has provided reassurances for some of the population. But the overall situation in Afghanistan hasn't really improved. As a result, where can they all go? Not everyone really has the means.
Claire, thank you very much indeed. And that's reporters here on France 24. Stay with us.